So just one thing quickly, we did have a couple of people in the chat. There's Kate and there's Chris. And they're both seem to be asking, is their audio, they're having issues with their audio. So if you actually can hear us, and you're not having any audio problems, could you pop in the chat, yes, I can hear you, or something like that?
That was very bad timing, James, because I was just about to introduce everybody.
All right.
So we might have to edit the beginning of the video. Okay, if just to finish that point, and then we'll edit the beginning of the video.
Yeah.
If you click on the center, if I just, you might find that you'll also get the audio to start as well. So, okay, hopefully everybody's live. Let's get going. So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this week's webinar from the team at Anicca Digital. It's myself, Anne Stanley. I'm founder and CTO, and I am just acting as the host. But the presenter for today is Zach and James. You can see they're both on the screen there. I'm going to pass quickly over to Zach. He's going to get going straight away. If you've got any questions, please write them in the chat. James will be able to answer. And secondly, you will get the video later on today. So I'm going to turn my camera off and pass it over to James. Oh, and Zach, sorry.
Right, perfect. Right, can everyone see the slide there? You should be able to see the introduction slide.
I can definitely see them up, but if you guys just put in the chat, yes, I can see the slides, something like that, that would be helpful.
Great.
Yeah, everyone seems to be able to see them. So off you go.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. The last time I was here, for any of you who may have seen that one, I made the case for the value of human content, why human writing still wins, and why it's worth protecting, with a bunch of stats, basically. Today is kind of the practical sequel to that. It's sort of showing how, if the human voice is worth protecting, this webinar is about how you incorporate AI without losing your voice. So specifically, we're going to look at how we use Claude as an editor and a consistency engine, rather than a ghostwriter. So everything I'll show you comes from systems we've kind of used previously, and what we found works very, very well. James and myself have kind of put these things together. So any point of any questions around the memory files or how we've set things up, James might be able to provide some more background too. Okay. So a few of you may have seen this, but first, a little about me. So I'm Zach Averre. I'm a senior content account manager at Anicca Digital. I've been in digital marketing for over a decade now. I've only ever worked in agencies. So in that time, I've worked across a real mix of clients. So I've had to learn how to sound like a lot of different brands, a lot of different people, which is really what today is about. It's about understanding that voice and keeping it consistent. So when it comes to marketing, I really enjoy it because I love the power of communication and how you can reach people. In our case, and what we're looking at is sort of reaching your customers and really speaking to what they're looking for. I'm also still learning about AI. Mostly these days, teaching it to edit and things like that. But find it very interesting from a technological point of view. Also, if you're not familiar with Anicca, if this was one of your first webinars, we are an award-winning digital agency based in Leicester, and we're kind of the backbone of everything we do is a data-driven approach. So that sort of defines the strategy, the social, the search, the shopping, the skills. Everything we kind of do is kind of grounded in that. So here's the agenda for today. We're going to start with why AI content often reads as generic. We're going to look at a style guide that AI can actually follow. We're going to look at setting up your Claude projects. We're going to look at the benefits of Claude as an editor and not a writer. We're going to also then investigate kind of the consistency across formats and the quality control. Okay, so let's start with the problem. You've all read AI content and know within a sentence or two exactly what you're reading. The interesting sort of question is how you know it, because if you can see the signs and you can understand the phrasing and the style and the structure that just triggers something in your brain, then you can write rules against them. And if we can write these rules, then you can hand those rules to Claude and make it catch them for you. So the first one we're going to look at is we're going to start with vocabulary. AI, whether we like it or not, has a house style because it's kind of trained on averages of what is the most common word that comes after this. It is non-committal, it generalizes, and it uses a lot of filler phrases. And the same words crop up everywhere. One of my favorite articles is one of those ones where they, I believe it was by Grammarly, where they looked at the commonly overused words and at things like delve, seamless, robust, vibrant, elevate, unlock, tapestry seems to come up a lot. They're usually using very overwrought and unnecessary phrases and words. Some of the phrases are, in today's fast-paced world, it's important to note, in the ever-evolving landscape. Here's the thing, though. None of these words are like technically wrong. Delve is a perfectly fine word. In an ever-evolving landscape is a great way to introduce something. The problem is they're nobody's voice. They're sort of the average of everyone's voice is what they've come to be. And when you as a reader half recognize that, the trust drops in that page. And there is research, we'll touch on a bit later, that sort of suggests that readers spend more time on human-written articles, even when they're not sure why they know it's human-written. So even if you're not an English major, even if you're not someone who's that interested in grammar, subconsciously you read something and you just know that it's not right. So that's why I like to use the line, if a word could appear on any website, it belongs on no website, basically. The second sign you're looking for is not just the words, it's also the structure. And this one may be harder to spot, takes a bit of active reading, but AI paragraphs all weigh the same. And by that, I mean every paragraph has the same length, every sentence has the same rhythm, every has the same shape. And this is something that humans don't write like. It's something I've spoken about in previous sorts of webinars. But when you're writing, you need to alter the pace at which you write to make sure that the reader stays interested. So if you're trying to build tension, use lots of short sentences to build tension. If you're going into a long, sonorous description, you use lots of commas and descriptors and things like that. What you don't want is all of the same. You want to vary it because brains get tired reading the same thing over and over again. Another thing that AIs like to do is the rule of threes. So this is the same in comedy as in writing. You always seem to list things in threes. It's just the way we do things. So for example, here we've got stylish, comfortable, and durable. It doesn't need to be like that. You could describe a product just with one of them. You could describe it with two of them. It doesn't have to be in the rule of threes, but AI, having been trained off, loads and loads of data, tends towards this rule of threes, and it can feel generic and it can feel sort of overdone. Another sort of AI paragraph common thing is the M dash. I don't know why. AI loves to use M dashes instead of commas. I'm assuming it's because it doesn't like to make a decision between regular comma use and Oxford comma use, so it decides to use something that's different. It likes to use dashes and M dashes instead. I'm not sure why. It's just usually a big giveaway. If you see a big dash in the middle of a paragraph separating something, chances are it was generated by AI.
And especially if you're looking at a body of text and it seems like almost every paragraph has like one or two of them, and they're recurring really frequently, that's like a big sign, isn't it? So.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as human beings, we generally use either, a comma, a semicolon, or a colon, depending on how long you want the pause to be and whether you're introducing the list, various grammatical things like that. And M dash, they get around that because it doesn't have to decide which of the three to use, really. Another thing is a hedge. So this is a kind of thing where it seems to be increasing the word count or trying to generalize and soften the blow of what it's supposed to say. So it's worth noting that. It's about to qualify something to make sure that you're not taking it too seriously. The other thing, too, is it can often overstate the opener. So if you say, I need a paragraph about choosing a sofa and the right color for the sofa, and it'll just restate the question you've put as, when it comes to choosing a sofa, it'll introduce the paragraph that way. So these are all kinds of things you can see. They kind of maybe seem not that important individually, but what matters for editing is these are patterns, and patterns are things that can be checked. And a human proofreader, when looking for these patterns, can certainly find them. But if you're working at scale, you can get tired. If you've got one person in the office whose job is to review all the content within the company that comes through, that's a bottleneck. And if you've done 20, 30, 40 pages, you might miss something.
Can I just interject a second? Because we did this panel yesterday at BT about AI recognizing content and content writing for AI. And one of the interesting things it said was when you were writing content that was deliberately to improve your GEO, your AI overviews, ChatGPT, is that you do need to write the whole thing out. And I think that's because the way that it needs all that context when it's collecting the information, the LLM is collecting the information. So I think the fact that AI writes like that is because that's what it needs when it's trying to collect the information. So I think you've got to be thinking with two hats on here. If you're writing something purely for an SEO perspective and trying to get into ChatGPT, you might have to tolerate some of that because if that's your objective. But if you're trying to write something that's beautifully written and you want it to be like a human, then you wouldn't let that through.
Yeah. There's also ways of structuring pages to do that. So if you want to make sure you're showing up for like long-term key phrases, for example, you can always include FAQs around that, which will help you kind of get spotted in AI overviews and things like that. So there are ways and means of writing for both the reader and the AI search, you know. But I take your point, Anne. You do need to kind of think of both in the moment. This is just to show that, you know, when it comes to editing for these patterns, you can do that using some tools. So why does this happen? It's not a defect, it's kind of a design, really. These models are trained on most of the internet, and they're tuned to produce the most likely next word. And the most likely next word is, by definition, the average, right? If you've seen any of the previous webinars, you know that I hate this Bayesification of the internet. You know, the value of human content. I spoke about Alvin Lucier's experiment, lossy compression. It's the same mechanism here, just on a smaller scale. If you ask for nothing in particular, you get the general frequency of the whole internet. Content written for everyone is content written for no one. So once you see it that way, you know, you can kind of figure it out. If you put something in, if you put something different in, you get something different out. Average in, average out. That's kind of how you want to look at it. The fix you want to look at is better instructions. And the more in-depth your instructions, the more in-depth the detail you can add, the better for everything, really. So with that, we're going to look at some of these instructions, the foundations of everything you want to do with Claude as a style guide, and how you want to sort of stick to your brand tone of voice. So the truth is, most brand guidelines were not written for writers, they were written for designers. After many, many years of working in the industry, there was a period of time where you had a glut of people developing these tone of voice documents, but there'll often be a document that you ask for and you get sent to you, and 75–80% of it is where the logo goes. These are the types of colors you use on the page. These are the typefaces we use when we use branding. Perfectly fine for designers. But then when it comes to the writing aspect, it has, you know, a single page with "we are," and it gives you 3 adjectives: bold, passionate, innovative. Those are not very useful. I mean, that's a mood board. It's not really an instruction. It's a kind of idea, but it's not really giving you how you should write. So that's to say that you need to create your tone of voice guide in this that actually feeds the written word. So AI cannot be authentic, so it has to take from this. So what you want to do is you want to add specific things like contractions and FAQs, never in body copy, no exclamation marks, spell out numbers under 10. These are small examples, but they're ways that your brand guidelines fail in, you know, traditionally fail, and ways that you can improve them now. Okay, so what goes into this guide? This is sort of the skeleton of a useful tone of voice document. We're going to break it down. What you want to do is you want to have an overall TLDR. You know, this is the voice of us. You can either use this. It can either be a description that you imagine putting into an AI to say, like, you are going to write as a knowledgeable specialist telling me why this ingredient is worth knowing about. Or if you want to be more esoteric with it, you can say, we want to use the voice of, and then you can use a particular actor, writer, something that inspires you or something that you think pertains to your brand tone of voice. All it needs to be is one sentence, and it answers your purpose with virtually any page or post. It can be the thing that you test against. Then you have the we are not sort of pairs. These are really useful. They used to be part of branding exercises a while ago, where you'd come up with, you know, 2 things that you say, we are confident, not boastful. We educate, we don't lecture. These sort of things where you're giving it a scale as if to say, this is what we are, this is what we're not. And once you have that, that is both useful for human writers and for your Claude projects and things like that moving forward. They're also really useful for edge cases where maybe you're not sure where you sit on two topics. For these ones, what I like to do often is either sitting in a room together, have a discussion about it, or better yet, have everyone decide and then poll it and then see how it goes. And you can see generally from your team within what they see the brand voice to be when it comes to a particular thing. And then you got your mechanics. You got your contractions, your Oxford commas, your exclamation marks, your numbers, dates, capitalizations, that sort of thing. And then your vocabulary, which we'll get to now, the words you prefer, the words you never want to see. So this brings us on to the band list. So this is something James and I kind of worked on with some of ours, and we've done it in layers. You got your universal layer, which is one that you want to apply to absolutely everything. So this is the one that I sort of used the example from before, the AI giveaways from earlier. So you find the data on these are the common phrases that come up all the time, and you just say, do away with them. We don't want them anywhere near our work. That's your universal, your base layer, and it goes across everything. Your second layer could be your sector cliches. So another problem that might come about from using AI tools is you may say, okay, here's blog 1, 2, 3 from my competitors. I need to create something similar. What do they do right? What should I incorporate? That sort of thing. And within it, you might get advice from your AI tool, which is then incorrectly saying, use these phrases because all your competitors use the same phrases. Now, this is not every single case, because obviously if you're within a particular industry where that's the industry norm, you may have to use that phrase, but you might want to avoid some of the cliches. So for example, if you work in the food industry, burst of flavor, a culinary journey, these are things that maybe everyone else phrases it as, but you don't necessarily have to phrase it that way. You can use your own voice and make it unique. Think of another one, like if you're looking on Rightmove at properties, a property that's nestled in this area, or it is a hidden gem. These are things we're all tired of hearing, and you can avoid it and try and be more unique. So these are not necessarily AI tells. They're just phrases that have been worn smooth from overuse, and they're cliched. But AI will reach to them because they are the average. So it's something that you want to include in your band list to make sure that you're not dulling what you're trying to put forward. And then finally, what you want is your own brand-specific bands. So these are particular things if you're in an industry, or if you're just tired of hearing a certain phrase, maybe someone in the C-suite doesn't like it, and you want to make sure that it's incorporated and that everyone avoids it as much as possible. So all of these rules work really well, but the main thing you have to remember is you have to write them all down. It can often be, you get these tweaks and someone says, don't quite like this phrase, or could we change that? You need to write these down and update them in your AI all the time, just to make sure. You need to keep it consistent as a habit, just so it's there and it's not lost in an email or in a call. Another useful thing you want to do when you're building this sort of project is you want to teach your model with good examples and bad examples. Good examples teach the model sort of what to copy. You just want a few, you don't need loads, just a few pieces that you say, these did really well, or we really like these, and you want to give it a reason as to why you like it. We like this page because it's specific, the product hero is in there, it's measured, whatever you want to describe it as. You want to add that annotation so it tells Claude or whatever you're working with what the property is that you like about it, so that it can use it moving forward. You also want to include some bad examples. So if there's anything that was maybe rejected by someone who was about to publish it, or if you yourself looked and thought this isn't quite right, you don't have to delete that document, keep it, add it, and then add the reasons why. For example, we used too many adjectives. It came across too breathless. It's not really that good. This was a product page, but the brand was the center of attention, not the product itself. So that's not good. It's exactly the same way you would train a junior writer in an agency. You don't just hand them the right things to do, or, say that's incorrect, this is the right way to do it. You show them a rejected draft and you say, this is why it's not right, because that's how you learn. So that's what you want to do with your AI agents too. You want to make sure you put in all of this early sort of learning so that it is able to use it moving forward. So you have that guide, you have this guide that the machine can follow. The next problem is entirely human. It's about getting it applied. So this is where Claude Projects is really useful for us, because a project is kind of a workspace. that takes one setup. And once you've got the memory file, once you can share that memory file with your colleagues and everything, and you can share the instructions or create an application for it, depending on how you want to go about it, you've got that workspace that anyone can work from. They can plug in their document, they can ask it to run an edit check, and it can come up with feedback. So it's usually got two things attached. You've usually got your standing instructions, which are applied to every conversation. And then you've got knowledge files, which are the documents that Claude can go and read whenever it responds. These are .md files, if I'm correct, James. And it's something that I had to learn sort of at the early stage.
Yeah, so if you were saving them on your PC, sorry, let me just flip my camera on.
Yep.
If you're saving them on your PC, then you would save them as a .md file. But that literally just stands for Markdown. So Markdown is actually a syntax and a structure and a format that you can write in. So essentially things like if you put a hash sign before a line, then that would count as heading 1. If you put 2 hashes, it would count as heading 2. If you put like 2 asterisks, it counts as bold. But it's basically a way to, because with most of these AI tools, in the areas where you can paste into their memory and get them to read from memory, read memory files, read from the memory area, most of those areas don't support rich text formatting like bolding and headings and stuff. So by adding extra characters and structuring your prompts in a certain way, you can essentially give extra context. But what I'll do is I will drop a link to a Markdown syntax formatting guide in the chat so people can have a look at it. So yeah.
Yeah, it just makes it easier for the AI tool to digest, isn't it? And allows for fewer mistakes if it's in Markdown, because it's closer to like a programming language you might understand, right?
Do you have like is it possible for you to like screen share the back end of Claude Code project somewhere where we might actually have some of that entered so people can like visually see it?
Maybe at the end you can have a look for it. I can
perhaps at the end, it might be good. So yeah,
I'll have a look. I'll have to open up and have a look, but I'll find something.
Cool. Okay, cool.
So the idea of the Claude Code being that once you've got these memory files and these instructions, you never have to worry about, uploading the brand document into a new Claude window or a ChatGPT window because it's already there. You just tell it to run the pass, do what it needs to do, and it will pull that stuff from memory already. Okay, so here's what goes into one of our projects. First, you've got those universal rules. Right, for us, it's use UK English, no M dashes, the universal band list. Then you've got the tone of voice document for what your brand sounds like. Then you've got your format specs. These are things like character limits for page titles or meta descriptions, so it can check to make sure that your page titles and everything fit what you need. It could be heading patterns. Do you mention brands in the heading? How do you go about that? Then you've got your call to action rules. Claude is genuinely good at sort of honoring these when they're written down. Otherwise, it'll just guess, and it could be quite wrong. It used to be that it couldn't count characters or word counts for some reason. I think it's better now, at least from my experience. It's better at sort of approximating, but it's still worth checking at the end yourself if you can. And then finally, what you've got then is just this complete thing that searches that edits everything you need and double checks everything and does it through a checklist. So the other thing you need to keep in mind is that you need to keep it a living document. It's all good and well setting this up, putting in a couple of hours at the front end to feed this all into a Claude project and create that. This is what I was saying earlier, where you need to make sure that you keep it updated. So any feedback you get where you say, okay, this is too formal, we never say premium, whatever it may be, you want to make sure that you're updating that in your Claude project. You also want to make sure that you date stamp that and you commit it to memory. It can be tricky, I know, especially if it's like late on a Friday or whatever, or you've got another meeting coming up, but just try and make sure that at some point you are updating these and keeping a living document. As for the date stamp, this really helps both with kind of contingency, so you can roll back things, and it also helps Claude so you can say, okay, work from the latest iteration, or make sure you're using the most up-to-date version. Otherwise, it might pull from things that are dated earlier, and you might lose sort of that consistency. So with that, you want to use Claude as an editor and not a writer. Most people may use it as a drafting tool, blank page, then you put a prompt, and then you get your first draft. I want to make a case for the opposite, where you write the first draft first, and then you use Claude to edit it. So the last webinar, I mentioned this. You'll remember this number. SEMrush did an analysis of 42,000 blog posts, and human written content was 8 times more likely than AI content to hold the #1 ranking position. Human pages sort of win at every position in the top 10, and the gap was widest right at the top. So in that sort of presentation, I argued is that the value is your writings precisely the part AI cannot supply. It's your lived experience, it's your data, it's your opinion, it's your expertise. The detail only someone who has actually done the thing would be able to include. When AI writes the first draft, that is the part that never makes it onto the page because the model doesn't know that. So what you want to do is you want to write the first draft, even badly if necessary. It can just be a few paragraphs. It doesn't have to make a lot of sense, just with all the specifics and your opinions intact. And then Claude can edit, it can tighten, it can check, it can suggest ways to improve or add to things, and it can catch inconsistencies. That way, the thinking kind of stays human, but the sense checking becomes automated and speeds up. It's also very handy if you don't consider yourself a very strong writer, because it's like having an editor there to help you get it to where you need it to be. So what we've got here is an example of an editing pass to show you. You got the tone of voice. So once you put it in, what it will do is it'll check the tone. Does the draft match the guide? Where does it not? Can it cite the sections that don't? This feels off. This sentence is boastful. The guide says confident, not boastful, so this seems wrong. Then you've got your repetition. What are these repeated phrases, repeated ideas, sentence openers that repeat? So this is a bugbear of mine and one that often happens. Humans fall into this too. But how does the sentence open? I've seen paragraphs that start with the same phrase, we do, etc. It keeps going that way. That just reads badly. If every sentence opens the same way, it just doesn't work unless you're trying to be a beat poet, really. The third one is jargon. Anything the reader will not say themselves, and that's often you want to flag that with a plain alternative. So this is obviously industry specific. If you're working in law or something that requires more specific language, fair enough. But for the most part, and something a lot of people overlook is that most people who use the internet, English is not necessarily their first language, and that the level of reading and comprehension you need to sort of aim for is like a lower high school level. It's not necessarily someone who's been to university to study English. So you need to make sure where possible, you're keeping your jargon or you're keeping your metaphors simple and things like that to make sure you're reaching a wider audience. Then you've got your banned words. So these that full 3-layer list that we went through, which we'll check and we'll mark with line references. This is the one that humans often miss, especially at scale, because we like to skim read. And if you're skim reading 20, 30 documents, Claude is really good at picking up each individual line. So it's a good sort of net to catch that. And then finally, your consistency. This is the naming of products, capitalization. It could be pricing that's up to date. It could be UK spellings. It could be date format. The whole idea of this is you want to create something that bundles this into one, and it's saved in a project. So you run the edit check, and it's the same standard every time whoever asks, whether it's you, whether it's someone in the C-suite, whether it's someone else. It works. Another thing you want to do is also you want to make sure that this tool, as you're building it, is not rewriting directly. You want it to ask for findings and to show you where the errors are, because the default behavior of any AI is to sort of hand you a draft and say this is the better version, and you just post it and everything's fine. The issue with that is the rewrite will be smoother. You also don't learn anything from it. It sounds off your voice, and you don't learn where your errors are. So instead, you ask it to list the problems, the location, the issue, the suggested fixes, the reason behind it. So like the sample on the side there, you can sort of see line 4, seamless, is on the banned list. Try simple. Line 9, third sentence in a row opening with we. Line 21, that claim needs a source. Then you go through the list and decide. You don't have to accept everything it says. You can reject it. You can argue back. You can change things. And this discussion is where the value is, because half the time you're arguing back, you're both sharpening the sentence itself in the process. You're also teaching the AI something, and you are learning something yourself. because you're learning that maybe this is something we need to incorporate later into the overall training for future documents if it's something that keeps popping up.
We do have a question.
Yep, go ahead.
And the question is there a working example that can be shared of these instructions and the output in action? So obviously, rather than you stopping and spinning up something new and going through the whole process, that would take too much time. Is there like an example that we can share of any of the content that this kind of stuff has produced that's already up somewhere?
None of it's been anonymized. I could send something after the fact if that works. If we sort of speak about that. When we send across the email with whenever we send that across with the slides and stuff, I can send across a sample of it, and maybe we can do an example of the markdown in that too.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Is that all right for everyone? Would that work?
I think that will be fine. I mean, obviously, a lot of the stuff that you work on specifically is client side, isn't it? So it's a bit difficult for you to always share loads of examples because some of them are like they've been paid for by clients and they're up on client sites and stuff. I do have at the end, if there's time, I have maybe some stuff that I could share. Yeah. So we'll see.
Well, I mean, specifically for the Anicca side of things, we can definitely run through that if you've got anything like that.
All right.
But yeah, I can see that. So an example and template would be great. Yeah, can do. We can definitely get that sorted for everyone.
Cool.
Just I see another question for Hazel there. So should I be doing all editing and writing work through a project, not a chat? I mean, James, you might be able to speak better on the performance side of things.
I actually replied in the chat, and what I said was, I'll read what I said. So I said it's a natural evolution. At first, you'll be in chats and you'll start saving banks of prompts on your PC, which you paste into the start of new chats that you start to kind of structure them. And basically, as soon as that process becomes too tedious and time consuming, and you're just thinking to yourself, wow, I wish it would just remember all of this universal stuff instead of me having to have some of it on my PC and put it into new chats all the time. That's really the point where I think projects starts to become useful. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, James. Appreciate that. So here's just like a very short example of a before and an after. So you can see the before on the right here is sort of the greatest hits from section 1. I've obviously gone with the most extreme case just to show you the difference between them. But you've got the cliches. You've got dive into a world of culinary excellence. Meticulously curated selection of vibrant, robust ingredients will elevate your cooking journey to new heights. Now, that as an introduction doesn't tell me much. Particularly if I'm on a product page. The after, however, does. You've got hand harvested from UK's autumn woodlands. These mushrooms carry an earthy depth that jarred mushrooms can't reach. 10 grams is all you need to turn your meal into a memorable umami experience, something like that. What you've got there is you've got something that gives you more information in the space of 30, 40 words just by virtue of that. You've got the amount, you've got where it's from, you've got what the product is, you've got a reason to buy it. You've got all of that in a very short, in the same sort of length, but actually tells you something as opposed to what an auto-generation thing might give you. And also here, nothing was added that the writer didn't know. So all of this knowledge was just buried under AI generalizations. All this information was on that page, just in another section, So consistency across formats and teams. This is another benefit of that editing process. This is where you can sort of roll it out across a blog, a product page, an email, a social post. What you want to do is you want to stick with the same sort of overall checks and balances, but all you want to do is you want to make sure that you alter the register and the format. So with a blog, you want to say, okay, blogs are going to be considered educational, developed ideas, so they can be longer, sentences can be longer. You want to say your product pages, okay, these need to be shorter, specific, practical. You're looking to make sure you motivate someone to click so they can be more salesy in the register. You then want to look at your emails. Are they plain and warm? You don't want any marketing flourishes. Your social, maybe. You want to look at how you can get that, condense something into the shortest possible format, often to meet limits on characters, but get across the same personality. This updated tone of voice, you should be able to put something in and say, okay, this is my blog. I need you to break it down into a series of social posts that I can use for whatever campaign. That's basically how you want to use this, but you want to make sure you add the registers in to your tone of voice so it knows, okay, for blogs I do this, for products I do this, for social I do this, and then that way you can direct it, and with each of these it can update. Does that all make sense to you guys?
I'm not seeing lots of questions related to that in the chat, so I think it does make sense to people.
No worries. Apologies to this. There's also regarding, I suppose, that you've answered there about the security, but where there is a way, and there's a way and means of protecting information and making sure it's just local, right, and protected and not shared for GDPR.
It depends on your AI provider. It depends on the settings that you've set in the settings menu of like Claude or ChatGPT or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it also depends on the tier of plan that you're running as well. Let me just pop this back on. Yeah, because I think with some of the providers, I'm pretty sure like some of the lower tier plans and stuff from like OpenAI and ChatGPT are more likely to feed more stuff back for training.
Mm-hmm.
But then I think with like Anthropic, it's a bit more nuanced. And if you're on like higher tier plans, or if you're using the API, or if in the settings you go into the settings and tell it not to learn from stuff, there's
Mm-hmm.
like ways and options around it. So it's actually something you have to explore on a case by case basis, depending upon your particular settings that you've set, your particular plan that you're on, and your particular provider. So
okay. And then, yeah, so this is to do with quality control. Just to close out, really, the aim of this is not to replace your writing. It's basically to hand everyone a checklist so they can keep consistency. This is really good if you sort of have maybe sort of one person that you rely on for your content, and then let's say they go on leave or they're on holiday, or they're poorly, and you need something to get published as quickly as possible. You've got this checklist that you can use even if you're not a writer. You've got someone who can fill in and help and double check the work you're doing. It's also really useful just as a tone of voice document for new starters. By having this, you can then output it as these are words we use, these are phrases we don't use, and it helps onboarding too. So it serves multiple purposes once you've set this up in the first place. And also another thing to remember is also to go with your gut. Sometimes you can override the AI if you feel it fits. I know we've said we've got these universal lists for things to avoid and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, you still need to make sure that you are the ones making that final decision. Sorry, my screen's just making. And just as an example, on the right-hand side here, this is one that James and I ran into, where we sort of tried to have a look at some meta descriptions, and 13 of them came back with the same opening of try this, ... The way we fixed it was not to tell it off. It was just a written rule of saying, make sure no opening word on more than one in a row in 5. Check the distribution before delivering. You add in an instruction.
It's less relevant when you're producing one big piece of long form content.
Yeah.
But the second you start to work in batches, it will go, oh, they like that. I'll just do that again and be lazy and do it again and again the same. So you have to instruct it not to, don't you? So,
yeah, for sure. And then, finally, we're just going to very quickly go through some of this, the quality control, because something we need to keep in mind is that it can hallucinate. It can sound as confident when it's wrong as when it's right, and confidence is not accuracy. So the rules I often like to stick to is every fact, figure, price, or name that you use, you need to make sure you check it against the source and make sure that you're only providing sources that you trust. If you let the model sort of run off and find sources for things, it can often find something maybe is out of date or irrelevant. It might find something harmful, which is maybe, like a case study or a medical study that isn't reliable or whatever the case may be. So you need to make sure that every statistic, every claim is backed up by something that you've actually checked yourself or that you reference. One of the best ways to do this is just make sure do the initial research yourself, even if you've got like a catalog or your own data, and then feed it into the system and make sure that it references it when it uses it. You want to make sure you want to keep the product facts in the project itself so that it can work from your feed and not its own memory. Okay, and then finally, this is something you can do too. This is before it goes out. You want to make sure you're double checking the content. You want to scan for M dashes, for example, scan for banned words. If you're working with a lot of content, this can be quite quick. It can be repetitive, but you still just want to make sure you're scanning and double checking, check the spellings of things. If you know there's something that comes up quite often, you can just do Control F and look for that adjective, see if it pops up, how many times does it pop up, that sort of thing. You don't want to do quick checks to just before you post it, because the idea is you want to save a little bit of time here and there. Also, you want to, check your character limits, your headings, your key phrase placements, check your links, all the usual SEO stuff that you want to make sure works. Oh, sorry about that. So, what you also need to keep in mind, that the same guide works for 60 characters as for 1,500. This is just sort of an example of that. Discover our amazing range of premium products. Elevate your everyday shop now. And then it doesn't really have much, but if you say merino jumpers knitted in the Scottish borders from £45, free UK delivery on orders over £60, that's an example. So the idea behind this is, well, that generic AI content is a choice. It's what happens when you give the model nothing to work with. The more you put in is the more you get out. So you want to make sure that you write the experience, the data, the opinion. You use Claude then to edit and to check, and then you sign off at the end. And with everything that I've presented before with AI tools, AI is a tool and not a solution. The human bit is the bit that matters most, particularly when it comes to content creation. So that's kind of everything in a nutshell. I hope you found it quite useful. I can have a look at finding something on Claude, James, while we answer some questions in the meantime, just to get an example of Markdown.
Sure, there aren't lots of questions. There are not lots of questions in the chat, but I could show a bit. I mean, like you say, the human element is really important, and that's why we don't really deploy content for clients without human oversight. However,
is it worth showing them what a template EMV file looks like, which is Markdown, because that also shows them if you start doing API keys and stuff, and maybe share the blog to how they load it up into, use Claude Code to load it up into WordPress, so you can skip that step altogether.
Yeah, so that's what I was saying, is that, whilst Zach's made a lot of really good points today in terms of the human being a very integral and important part of the process, and in terms of putting content live for clients, we don't do that, just like spam something up with AI and then not look over it with a human being. But what I was about to explain is that on our own turf, on our own website, because we always like to be experimenting and playing with technology and things, on our own website, we actually do have a couple of fully automated pipelines set up using Claude Code. And if I was to show you guys an example of one of those, I might be able to also give you an example of some Markdown, which helps to humanize content as well, which kind of ties back to what Zach is looking at.
While you're doing that, James, I've got two things to tell the guys, and also got two polls. So if you want to get that set up, I've got a couple of polls, because first of all, I've shared the handouts top right. Zach loaded it but didn't realize you have to hit the share button. I've done that hundreds of times myself, so that's why you couldn't access it. So you guys weren't doing anything wrong. It was our end, we didn't get that right. Also, I have got a guide to Claude Code. If you haven't already read it, you should. It is really helpful introduction. We recommend when you're training you use Claude Code Desktop, which I don't know whether you showed the guys. And secondly, while you're getting ready, James, I need to do a little poll. We've got a decent number of you online. We're off during August. We're still running the Thursday AI Club, which of course you can join. It's £40 a month for an AI workshop every other week. Q&A. It's a 3-hour session every other week. But we want to plan the rest of the webinars for the rest of the year, which is the alternative. So I've got two big questions to ask you. The first one is, what do you want us to talk about? So I'm going to share that one first. And then I'm going to ask you what format. So let's do, and then James, we've got another 10 minutes anyway, James, if you get your stuff ready. So you can tick as many of these as you'd be interested in. So I'm going to read them out. So what topics and channels would you like us to cover in future webinars? So SEO, GEO, content marketing, that can include link building, social media, organic and paid, paid media, PPC and other types of paid media, analytics tracking and reporting, creative branding and design, technical and development, so the more sort of slightly geeky stuff, e-commerce, retail and marketplaces, you know, Amazon, Tesco's.com, Mano, those sort of things. E-commerce, affiliates, email and other client acquisition retention methods, lead generation, use of marketing automation, CRM systems, that sort of stuff. Use of AI to support any other channels, use of AI to make me more productive. And if you can think of any other topics, please write them in the chat. That's the first. I'll give you a little bit longer. There's 16 responses. So if we could have a few more, please, I could do with at least twice that many. Give us a good idea. It's quite a share. As usual, SEO and content is one of the most popular. That's not unusual.
It's because it's the most mystical.
It's the one that everybody's struggling with, because all the changes, Google's very, very difficult to win at the moment. So I guess that is not surprising. Interesting, analytics has come up quite high, and tracking, reporting, and then social media is quite high as well. So that gives us a nice spread. It's quite common that paid is not very popular, but actually the people that are really into it really enjoy them. You were going to say something, Zach?
I was going to say there's a few in the chat now too.
Okay.
Claire Kelly says AI for lead gen would be useful.
Okay.
And Nathan says talking to clients about AI, the positives and negatives and why you use it. So I suppose that's like the framing about it and how you address it.
If somebody could copy that into our marketing chat, that would be really useful. I've got about half the people now. There's still a few more that haven't typed it in. So if any of you would like to quickly add a little bit more. So this is what we've been finding. It matches quite consistently what is popular. So I'm going to close that. And now what I'm going to ask you is about different formats. So we want to mix it up a little bit. So I'm going to start polling with this. So let me just get rid of that one in there, maximize it. Okay, so what formats would you like to see more of? Label content for different levels, so specific to beginners or advanced, shorter, 30 minutes, or some of those, and then maybe a few mix. Or do you like the longer ones? This is just to sort of try and get what preference, you know, do you prefer something that's 30 minutes or do you prefer something like an hour? We tend to stick with an hour because we've got so much to say, but it'd be interesting to hear what you think. Interviews like a podcast, guest speakers, industry experts or tech providers, case studies or real examples, maybe with the brand talking as well as the agency. So maybe if we've got something on Charles Bentley or something like that. What's new in a channel technology? Q&A or ask me anything. You ask a problem, we will offer solutions. Panels where we ask questions and the experts answer. So it's a bit more like, you know, the questions are a little bit more planted, so we can discuss a topic rather than you just choosing the question and chucking them out. Tips and advice, any other ideas? So interesting to see.
I don't know if that poll was multiple choice or one only. Kate saying you can only choose one option on that poll.
Okay. Maybe you could write what you'd like in the chat, if that gives you any ideas. I can't believe I did that. I'm usually really... Is it worth me running it again once you guys have had a chance to...
I actually kind of, you know what, in a way, I mean, it's the kind of thing where you could do it multiple choice, but I feel like in this instance, not giving multiple choice makes people be decisive and we'll get more decisive numbers.
Okay, well, you can change your choice if you like and choose what you think would be your favourite. I think maybe that would be a way. And we might have to run that another day.
But there are a lot of people who are interested in the case studies and real example stuff. So that's really interesting.
Yeah. Still annoying that I got it wrong, though. Okay, you go ahead, James, and I'll see if I can reproduce this.
Yes. Okay. Maybe we can run it again at the end. Maybe we'll run it again at the end.
Yeah.
So, and we've still got until like 3:30, I think, judging by my calendar. So what I'm gonna
We've only got 4 minutes.
Oh, I've only got. We should probably skip what I was going to do. Then it's too long. So, yeah.
What is there anything you can show?
Not in 4 minutes, realistically. So,
can you show a MD file?
I can show the interior of an MD file. Okay. Do you know what? I can do one thing. There's one thing that I can do that actually might be useful to people. There's one thing I can do that might be useful.
I mean, really, when you start to do this stuff, this is really the sort of 2-hour workshop which we do in the Thursday AI Club. I'll put a link in if anybody's interested in.
So this is the interior of an MD file. So that link I shared earlier in the chart, giving markdown syntax. This is basically how it's formatted. So if you have 2 hashes, it's like a H2. If you have 1 hash, it's a heading 1, etc. Double asterisk is bolding and stuff like that. But yeah, like I was saying, it's just giving more kind of context to AI in terms of the prompt. This funny looking thing is actually a table. So you can include tables if you mark it up in a certain way. But one thing that you can do is you can obviously just write a prompt normally, and then you can put it into one AI, ask it to markdown enrich it, and then put it into another AI. So you can even use AI to help you format these things. This particular one is a very condensed version of what one of my own tools does. So I have a tool that produces these great big weekly search news posts. So it checks like hundreds of RSS feeds from different websites, and it works out what the best news is, and then it crawls all of them individually, and then it puts it all together in a post for me and stuff like that. And I've started originally this was just for me, but I've started publishing it on our site as well, and you can click and you can go through to the sources and stuff like that.
We did this in a webinar 2 weeks ago. I'll share it actually.
But what this stuff does, so this is an extract of some of the stuff from that tool, which is built inside of Claude code. And this prompt is actually an extract of my content humanization layer. So you can see like why it exists, hard ban words and phrases. That's something Zach was talking about. Soft limited words, verb repetition, watch list. No EM dashes, none. So it's got the EM dash in there and the EN dash and double hyphenation and stuff like that. Vary the punctuation, diet, this is an important one, structural anti-formula rules. So this is the thing that makes it so that it doesn't keep repeating the same internal structure within an article, which makes it easier to fingerprint. So what I've done is I've got my Claude code to extract part of itself, its content humanization layer, but I've got it to take out anything that is sensitive and basically store it in a little MD file. So this is something that you guys could potentially have because it doesn't contain loads of sensitive stuff and it is a bit condensed down. So what I can probably do, if I go back over here, I've just popped it on here on my Google Drive. And what I'm going to do if I stop sharing my screen for a second, I'm actually just going to pop this in the chat. So if you guys want to experiment with MD files, you can download this one, and that actually contains some of, not all of, because I wanted to keep some of the secret sauce for myself, obviously, but it contains a good chunk of content humanization logic in an AI readable format. So once you download that file, it will be a .md file, and because you've never opened one before, your computer probably won't know what to do with it. But if you double click on it and it says, I don't know what this is, tell me what to open it with, just open it with normal Notepad and you'll see everything in there. Mm-hmm. And you can then copy it from inside, and you can begin putting it in the back end of Claude Web, like in Claude projects or wherever you want, and you can play around with it. So that's a little extra for you guys. Hope that's useful.
Okay, well, it's 3 o'clock and I know we lose a lot of people, so I'm just going to ask everybody to kindly give you guys a review. If you would love to send these guys a review. We'll do 2. The reviews.io one's easier because you don't have to log in. So that's dead easy to do. I'll close that down. Mm. I think we're over 700 now, so that's good. And then the second one is just a Google review. which is a little bit more. You've got to be logged in to do that one. But we don't get as many of those, so I think we've only got 100 of those. There you go. So this is the last one for the summer. We'll be back in September. We haven't got the program sorted yet, but we will use your ideas. You'll get the email as normal. We're also going to try and send the email out the week before, so you've got a little bit more notice. And Zach and James are also going to be putting it on the website. We're going to start putting it on Eventbrite as well to get a few more people involved. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a great summer. And we'll see you in September, unless, of course, you want to join the Thursday AI Club, in which case we'll see you next week. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye now. Bye.